I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Nikki Druce.
And this is Killers, Cults and Queens.
The podcast where we journey to the spookiest, scariest and downright weirdest corners of the world.
Today we're delving into the scandalous life of the Elizabeth Taylor of the Middle Ages. It's the horrible history of King Henry VIII. You don't want to know what's going on beneath this corset.
I was with that one, but the one that's next to her, that one will do.
Yeah, she'll do the job.
No.
But she had the original BBL.
I guess that wasn't his vibe.
Not a flattering thing like being called Megan the Stallion, just an old fat name. Are you ready?
Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. I've already got the history down. Let's go.
Imagine holding all the power in the whole of Britain and being so drama-filled that your personal life began to outshine your nobility. For Henry VIII, his messy relationships and penchant for fuckboy behaviour got him into a whole lot of trouble. But his influence spread far and wide, and he was so formidable, even criminals feared him. Welcome to Killers, Cults and Queens. But before we dive into today's case, how you doing, mine, Nikki?
I'm so excited for this one. This is already right up my alley.
I think it's up both of our alleys.
Yeah, particularly with the outfit you are wearing. I feel like you were born ready for this.
There's not many times I can bring out a Tudor Renaissance piece and sit like I'm posing for a portrait. But quite frankly, Nikki Druce, I wanted to do this case purely so I could bring this outfit out of retirement.
I feel so underdressed. I feel like I should have made more of an effort. I've only got slightly a little bit of a bouffant, and that's it today. And a pussy bow.
A little pussy cat.
Yes.
No, I have to say, Nikki, you always bring the glamour, you always bring the drama, and quite frankly, this is overdressed for me. So.
I have got some mutton shoulders, so I thought that was quite Tudory. That was my plan, was to be a little bit, a nod to the Tudor, but mine is also with a little bit of Victorian, which is kind of me all over, really, isn't it?
Down to a T. But we are historian buffs, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We do love a bit of history, and I think this one is so up both of our alleys that we're very excited about it, aren't we?
And the future of Killers, Cults and Queens starts now by going back into the past. Now, today's story is something a little bit different for us, but it's been one of those things on my list for a while, but we've never really known how to tie it in. But today, we're going to make it work and give you a history lesson in all things Tudor, as it's truly a passion of mine for quite some time. But Nikki, how is your Tudor history?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm a complete novice, but, I know a little bit here and there. And I know, obviously, the rhyme. I gave you that at the top of the episode, so I remember that from my school days. But other than that, I know fleeting bits, but not the whole story. There's definitely things that if I was to have an exam, which hopefully we're not having today. But
Pop quiz! Pop quiz!
No! And I'm naked!
You don't want to know what's going on beneath this corset.
So yes, it's a bit of a fever dream, isn't it? But if you were to give me a pop quiz, I don't think I would be able to complete it more than a D+, I reckon.
I think that's satisfactory. Everybody aims for a C, but I think you always aim for the D.
Well, it's where the fun is.
Unless you're into the V.
Yep.
Well, shall we set the scene for this episode?
Go on, then.
It's January 1536 in Greenwich, southeast London, and King Henry VIII, age 44, is preparing for a joust, one of his favourite pastimes. Henry, a keen hunter and horseman, thrived on such displays of athletic prowess, proof, he believed, of a true king. But as he steadied himself for the mock battle, disaster struck. At full gallop, Henry's horse stumbled, throwing him violently to the ground. Tangled in heavy armour, he was crushed beneath the weight of the animal. Onlookers thought he was dead. His wife Anne Boleyn, pregnant at the time, was told to prepare for the worst. Miraculously, after 2 hours unconscious, Henry awoke. But he was not the same person. Recovery revealed a man transformed, once noble, now cruel and volatile. Those closest to him would suffer most, and his wife Anne herself would soon become the first queen executed in Britain. But how did Henry keep his subjects loyal and become so feared that even criminals trembled before him? Let's find out.
Wow, he is a formidable character, isn't he?
He's a twat. Let's call him a
You can't defame the dead.
It's been quite some time.
It has been quite some time. That's our motto on Killers, Cults and Queens. So this is interesting because this is so drama-filled already, isn't it? So he's having a lovely day out doing what he loves best with his jousting. And then his horse falls on him and they're both in armour. So they're both crushed. And the weight of that armour must have been immense. So no wonder he was knocked out. But how terrifying that he was out for 2 hours cold.
You're right. Like, it was heavy. If you think about the weight of a horse and a full suit of armour was between 15 to 25 kilograms, that was a lot of weight. He wasn't quite as his fully obese stage yet, but he was getting quite stocky. And you can only imagine the crushingness of all of that underneath you. Yeah, a lot.
And he was a big guy as well, wasn't he? I don't think he was little. I think he was, at least 6 foot, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was around 6 foot, 6'1".
Okay, so he was a big guy.
Big, tall, broad, and heavy. Sounds like the recipe for a Friday night, wouldn't it?
A lovely bear.
So, to begin today's story, let's take it all the way back to the year 1509, when a nervous 17-year-old Henry suddenly found himself becoming king. Now, Henry VIII wasn't originally destined for the throne. He was the second son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, and in Tudor times, this meant that his big brother Arthur was the golden child. Now, Arthur was married off to the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon, but within months of their wedding, he caught some kind of illness and died at just 15 years old. Now, can we just address the elephant in the room that he was getting married at 15?
Lots of them did, though, didn't they? If you didn't live for as long, which a lot of them didn't, then I guess you kind of got to push all of those years back, haven't you? Which is not right.
I haven't finished my GCSEs!
I know. I really don't think I would be wanting to settle down at 15 years old.
Well, I got married at 27 and everybody said that was young, so...
Only at the grand old age of 40 am I getting married.
Hey, you've been a busy bee. But that left young Henry, then only 10 years old, as the heir to the throne, which was a shock as he never thought he'd get a look in, a bit like Prince Harry. When Henry's dad died in 1509, the crown was passed to 17-year-old Henry, and he was a breath of fresh air for the British public. Unlike his cautious, penny-pinching father, Henry was athletic, charming, and obsessed with glory. He inherited not just the throne, but also the expectation to marry Catherine of Aragon, his brother's widow, to keep the Spanish alliance intact. Now, Nikki, does that sound hauntingly familiar?
It sounds a bit like Mary Cosby tried to keep hold of the church, doesn't it?
Niche reference, but if you're a Salt Lake City Housewives fan, that one's for you.
Oh, Christ on a bike.
But can you even believe what a change in less than a decade, from not thinking you'd be sitting on the throne to now being hitched with your brother's widow?
It's a bit of a handbrake turn, isn't it? I thought I was going to have an easy life, but now I'm having to marry my brother's widow. That's just a bit odd, isn't it?
Do you know what I'd liken it to? Going on the waltzers and coming off feeling dizzy and sick. You don't know what's going on.
If I remember rightly from history class, I think he was going to go into a life of religion, wasn't he?
You're right. He wanted to go into the church, but he also trained as a musician as well. So that could have taken him down any path because, look, there wasn't a lot popping in the Tudor times. So you were either popping your purse to an accordion or you were going to church and Sunday Mass. Now, you'd be right in thinking that this situation set the stage for the messy, bloody, and downright bizarre relationship saga that would define his reign and especially his marriages. Now, because we could write an entire book on each of these marriages, we only have about 45 minutes to spare in this episode. So we're going to give you a brief overview of each of them. Now, we all know the rhyme. Nikki, take it away again.
Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. And I don't know why I can suddenly remember that now, because I could never blinking remember it in school, but I can now.
Maybe Six the Musical?
I've not seen it.
Okay, we need to do like a school trip to go see Six the Musical.
That's what we need to do, yes.
Well, regardless, we are going to introduce you to each of Henry's wives in chronological order. So let's start with the diva herself, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon was a Spanish princess who, as we know, married Henry's brother first. Keep it in the family and all that. Catherine gave Henry only one surviving child, Mary, the Queen of Scots. But this wasn't good enough for Henry, and when after years of trying, she didn't give him a son, and she was nearing the end of her natural child-producing years, because that's just what you do in relationships.
Apparently so. I think it speaks volumes about the patriarchy at that time that you were there as a woman to look after your husband and to produce a child. You had no other role to play. That was it.
Disgusting, but luckily we've advanced a bit since then. So, as there was no way to get rid of your wife before, Henry had come up with something clever in order to save Catherine, as despite all the rubbish around gaining a male heir, he did actually like her very much, and they were married for 24 years, which in Henry terms, that's impressive. So Henry yeeted the Pope and created the Church of England in order to divorce Catherine. So if you ever wondered who to thank for being able to get rid of your loser ex-spouse, then good old Henry did that. And I think that's one of the only good things he did.
I didn't know that. That's mad that he created the divorce to get rid of Catherine. Poor Catherine.
Now, here's the heartbreaking bit. Now, Catherine refused to step down as queen and basically died of heartbreak, signing letters to people as Catherine the Queen to the bitter end. So, just as you think Henry couldn't have handled this any worse, he then decides to do the worst thing he could possibly do in this situation and starts making the moves on Catherine's lady in waiting. Cue stage left. Anne Boleyn.
If I thought he was all right for making the divorce, even though it was to Catherine's detriment, this is not good behaviour, is it? This is, I was with that one, but the one that's next to her, that one will do.
Yeah, she'll do the job. But from day one, Anne Boleyn, who may have been as young as 15 years old when the king first started making advances towards her, was sharp, witty, and basically said, if you want me, it's got to be the whole shebang. She said, I don't want to be any side piece. If you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. Whoa. Anne's sister Mary had also been one of Henry's mistresses before, but Anne said she was never going to sleep with Henry without a royal title. What a clever diva.
That is securing your future, isn't it? And how smart of her at such a young age as well to think, actually, I'm not going to get with you unless I'm going to get those financial rewards.
That was the original prenup.
Yeah, it really was.
Henry tore England apart to marry Anne by switching England from Catholic to Protestant pretty much overnight, which caused huge civil unrest and thousands of deaths as a result. Now, have you ever had anybody so besotted with you that they basically destroy a country for you?
Oh, I think I've struggled to have people buy me a cinema ticket, let alone destroy a country for me. But no, I can categorically say that nobody has ever destroyed a country for me. Maybe a dance floor, but not a country, I'm afraid.
That dance floor was on fire if they were trying to impress Nikki Drews.
Yeah.
They're going to work overtime. Anne got pregnant and gave birth to Elizabeth. And of course, we all know Elizabeth eventually became queen after her dad's death. But Henry didn't think a woman could ever rule the country. So, tale as old as time, Henry's a twat, and on to the next one.
For sure.
But again, in a cruel twist of fate, Anne got pregnant with a boy. But when Henry had his jousting accident in Greenwich, she was told that Henry was going to die. And she was so grief-stricken and panicked that she actually miscarried, bless her.
Oh, poor Anne.
Now, Henry always knew he was punching way above his weight with Anne, and she was way more charismatic than him, incredibly charming, and if her daughter was anything to go by when she grew up, a formidable and wise character. So the downfall in their marriage was inevitable. After his accident, it seemed Henry changed. We know he had a serious head injury, but this accident also made him question his mortality. If he could die at any moment, who was going to take over the throne after him and carry on the bloodline? So obviously, Henry became increasingly bitter and twisted, and Anne's once defiant and stoic temperament soon began to grate on him. With many whispers in his ears from the courtiers, he soon heard rumours about Anne that he was willing to believe. Henry accused Anne of adultery, incest with her brother, and witchcraft. One reason being, as she allegedly had 6 fingers on her right hand with an extra little finger. But many people regard this as a myth nowadays, but I would love to see that.
I remember being little and going to Madame Tussauds and my mum saying to me, count how many fingers she has, and her having 6. So I think even her waxwork has 6 fingers.
It's historically incorrect because it's not been proven. But all of this was fake, of course, and it was just created so Henry had an excuse to get Anne executed. Sadly, Anne was executed in 1536 by an imported French swordsman, as even though Henry was killing his wife, it had to be seen to be done in the cleanest and fastest possible way. Anne was gracious to the very end, even praising her husband before she died, saying he was a kind and gentle king. She was gracious and appeared unfazed right up until the very last second. In fact, the secretary to the French ambassador, Lancelot de Calle, was in the crowd that day, and he wrote the following account after her beheading. She gracefully addressed the people from the scaffold with a voice somewhat overcome by weakness, but which gathered strength as she went on. She begged her hearers to forgive her if she had not used them all with becoming gentleness, and asked for their prayers. It was needless, she said, to relate why she was there, but she prayed the judge of all the world to have compassion on those who had condemned her. And she begged them to pray for the king, in whom she had always found great kindness, fear of God, and love of his subjects. The spectators could not refrain from tears.
It's a lot, isn't it? I just feel really sorry for her just to be in that situation and at such a young age as well. And she's not done anything wrong.
Huh? She didn't even have 6 fingers.
Head injuries have a lot to answer for, don't they? They really, really do.
Thank God for the CT scanner. Anne gracefully didn't admit to anything she was accused of, and it said that she was generous to her husband despite his obvious mistreatment of her, as she feared repercussions for her family, as he had now become a vicious, bloodthirsty man. Anne was executed in the Tower of London, outside the White Tower, and buried in the chapel within the grounds, and she was just 29 years old. But before Anne was even cold, Henry already had his next wife lined up.
Here he goes again.
The before we dive into the gears of this episode, I have to tell you what happened last night. I was playing my fave game, RuPaul's Drag Race Match Queen, you know, matching puzzles, unlocking wigs, living my best fantasy, when somebody booted my outfit I made, which I know for some of my earlier looks were a boot, but not right now. No, thank you very much. But I wasn't about to let that slide. I went back in, leveled up, added some more sparkle, and came back at a legendary level. Only seems fitting, and that's what I love about Match Queen. Every round is a chance to turn it around and make a comeback. Now, this game is free on iOS and Android, and it's fabulous and it's dangerously fun. So please tell me you're playing Match Queen, and if you're not Divas, well, fix that immediately. All right, now back to our regularly scheduled drama, though honestly, nothing is as dramatic as getting booted in that game. Now, in a classic pattern for Henry, he once again went for the previous Queen's lady in waiting. You can't make this up.
No.
But this time, she couldn't be any more different than Anne. She was quite obedient and seemed to have a calming effect on Henry's temper, which was raging out of control. It's believed that Jane Seymour was Henry's favourite of all his wives, and she finally gave Henry a son, good old Edward. However, Jane died less than 2 weeks after his birth of postnatal complications, meaning they were only married for a year and a half. Now, interestingly, when he eventually died, he had himself buried next to Jane Seymour so they could be reunited. Now, I'm not sure what wife number 6 really thought of that.
I can imagine that probably didn't go down particularly well, but it's Henry. He's going to do what he wants to do, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the king of the castle. Get down, you dirty rascal. So we've met the first of 3 wives now, and what an absolute shit show that has been. But, Nikki, the fun doesn't stop there. Are you ready for chapter 4?
Yeah, go on then.
Chapter 4, Anne of Cleves. Now, next up, we have perhaps the funniest of all of Henry's marriages, the German princess herself, Anne of Cleves. Now, she was chosen by Henry as his next wife via a portrait painting, the most Tudor way to choose a marriage I've ever heard.
There's no Tinder back then, is there? So no swiping. Instead, people just hold up portrait paintings and you ask them to move right or left.
And you go, I do. But talk about a case of catfishing, as when she arrived for the wedding, like a good old mail order bride, she didn't look anything like her portrait. And Henry was disgusted by her. Poor Anne, what did she do to deserve this?
Poor thing, having to travel all that way. Henry's no oil painting himself, let's face it. And then to be turned down by somebody that looks like Henry. That's not good, is it?
No. Now, this is awful for Anne, but Henry used to call her his Flanders mare, which is basically one of those thick-as horses you see in the old Dutch paintings. So, not a flattering thing like being called Megan the Stallion, just an old fat nene. So, somewhat expectedly, their marriage was never consummated, and so Henry had it annulled after 6 months. And Anne managed to keep her head and that big fat old booty and went back to Deutschland unscathed, apart from being fat-shamed, and again, typical trash man antics from good old Henners. But weirdly, the two ended up being good friends once the dust had settled, giving her the title of the king's sister, and Henry financially looked after her until the rest of her life. Probably the nicest thing he ever did, which makes a change because he is a twat.
But what a friend zone of being called the king's sister.
Well, if they never bonked, you can also be like inducted into the family of it all, because
Yes.
the minute you put it in, that's game over. You can't be calling, hey, my sis. We're not sisters anymore.
I'm surprised, though, that Henry didn't want to give it, the good old college try. I would have thought he was quite a virile man, wasn't he? So I would have thought he would have wanted to Give it a go.
She had the original BBL.
I guess that wasn't his vibe.
Now we move on to the last two wives, the two Catherines. Now we've got to pay attention here because this is where it gets a bit complicated with the names. So Catherine Howard was a teen bride to Henry and the cousin of Anne Boleyn. And truly, this guy's Tinder radius was clearly set to feet and not miles, wasn't it?
Yes, for sure.
Henry, at this point, was obese, pus-ridden, and nearly 50 years old. And Catherine Howard was around 17, and she couldn't stand him and truly thought he was repulsive, as anybody would. What's any 17-year-old going to do when forced to sleep with a grim older man? Well, she naturally starts looking around for people she actually fancied and was caught a few times with members of Henry's court doing the old 4-foot horizontal shuffle. I mean, do you blame her?
No, I really don't. We've established by now that Henry has a bit of a type, doesn't he? He likes them younger.
And that doesn't sit well with me.
No, but it's interesting because he was with his first wife for 24 years, and then he starts going out with all of these teenagers, and of course these teenagers aren't going to like him. He might be the king and he's got power, but he is, as you said, pus-ridden, obese, and not really a great prospect for them. Don't blame her at all for going out and looking elsewhere. I think I definitely would be doing the same.
Well, this was a risky little game, and the king could not be seen humiliated by his wife. Let's just remember that he was allowed to have as many mistresses as he wanted, and so unfortunately, poor Catherine was executed at just 19 years old, the second Queen of England to lose her head. Now, this is really sad, but Catherine wanted to make sure that she didn't falter at her execution. So the night before, she practiced putting her head on the block several times over to make sure she looked as calm and composed as possible on the day of her execution. However, what actually allegedly happened was that Catherine made a bid for freedom as she was taken out for her execution at the Tower of London and ran screaming for forgiveness through the corridors. Legend has it that she still haunts the tower to this day, trying to escape from her execution. Spoiler alert, she didn't escape.
Poor Catherine. So young as well, another young one. I know she's 10 years younger than Anne Boleyn, but 29 is no age to have your head cut off, is it? And 19 definitely is no age to have your head cut off. This is so strange, isn't it? I guess at this point of his life, he really is starting to lose it, because I feel like he had the opportunity to probably actually annul this one as well, and to say, oh, things just haven't worked out in this occasion, but it seems like he's really gone after blood on that one, and I don't really know why.
Well, he's got a vendetta against this family. It's the second one.
It's not good, is it? It's definitely not good.
And then we make it to the final woman to find herself stuck with Henry. But at last, this seems like a sensible pairing. Now, Catherine Parr was older, in her 30s, which was still young in comparison to Henry, twice widowed, and in his ailing years as he was slowly dying, she helped smooth things over with his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, as she knew he didn't have long left. Mary and Elizabeth also both liked and respected Catherine and thought she was a good influence on their father's fiery temper, something which they both inherited from him. But despite all this, there were still threats from Henry to Catherine, as she did tend to skew towards Protestantism, and Henry couldn't stand for that. But Catherine basically said, "Of course, darling. Anyway, about that thing you're doing, dying." And she managed to wiggle her way out of it. After all, Henry shouldn't die a single man. Now, when Henry eventually died from all his various ailments, Catherine went on to lead a relatively normal life. She became the first woman to ever write a book in the English language and have it published. But she sadly died from complications during childbirth and passed away at just 36 years old. It's so sad that her life was cut short, as it seems she was so destined for great things. But that concludes all 6 wives. So, out of all of them, Nikki, which one would you be? This is like a BuzzFeed quiz.
Oh, if I had to fill in all the answers for it, it would probably come back as Anne of Cleves, I reckon.
For that big old booty of
That
yours.
big old booty of mine, which I don't think I told you this, but the other day we'd been for a meeting somewhere and it was absolutely chucking it down with rain on the way home. And so I ducked into the pub to have a pint to wait for the rainstorm to blow over. And as I went
to the Winchester.
Yeah, and as I turned round to sit down, my enormous booty knocked a candle holder off the table and it smashed and went everywhere. And you know when a hush just goes across the room? That's exactly what happened. Just looked up and went, oops. But yes, I feel like Anne of Cleves would probably be my bag. It would be quite nice to have the benefits of having been near Henry and then actually being mates with him. But then you kind of have to wonder about what kind of person she was, because if she's friends with him and he is like this towards all of his wives, then maybe she's not so great of a person as well.
Maybe she's the problem.
Maybe she is the problem. We can't victim blame in this situation. It's all about Henry. It's all about Henry. But what about you? What one would you pick?
Do you know what? I think I'd be the last Eva Catherine Parr because,
Yeah.
I'm strong. I know how to play the game. And I don't think anybody could actually get rid of me. So the only choice for them is death.
That's how you're planning to go out.
Yeah.
Death drop. The end.
Survivor, last one standing. Nobody's going to get rid of Shezzy. So we've already established that Henry VIII was the bloodiest of all the royals. During his 36-year reign, it is estimated he ordered the deaths of 72,000 people. To Henry, commoners were expendable. Torture and death were tools to remind them of their place, and Henry was going to use his power to remind people of that at every turn. Now, after his jousting accident left him bloated, bitter, and unable to vent his aggressions, which sounds a lot like me after UK versus the world, Henry turned the Tower of London into his own personal torture chamber. Once a fortress, it now became a prison where enemies and supposed traitors were broken, executed, or they just quietly disappeared. One of the strangest cases tied to the tower involved the theft of the king's gold. In 1531, a shipment of 366 French crowns, today worth over £1 million, which is better than a rupee to badge, were transported into London in a chest bolted to the ship's floor and guarded around the clock. Yet, weirdly, when the guards arrived from the tower to transport the gold, the chest was empty. As you can imagine, with such a tyrannical king in charge, nobody talked about the missing coins. To admit any knowledge of the whereabouts meant certain death, so the treasure vanished without a trace. But rumours swirled inside the tower. A petty thief named John Wolfe was imprisoned there, and rumours began that he knew what happened to the crowns. John's time in prison was unusually comfortable. He was provided with food, ale, and even visits from his girlfriend, Alice Tankerville, which sounds like Alice Tinker from the Vicar of Dibley.
It really does, doesn't it?
But unbeknownst to the guards, Alice wasn't just a loyal lover. She had helped John pull off the heist. Dun, dun, dun! She could be in Ocean's 8.
So she really is the Bonnie to his Clyde, isn't she?
Oh, that's a good one.
Mm.
That is a good one, Nikki Drews. And very topical. Go back and listen to our Bonnie and Clyde episode. Now, Alice was strikingly beautiful and cunning at the same time. She distracted the merchants in charge of the ship by luring them onto a rowboat for a night of fun. Once ashore, John was waiting. He murdered them, stole their keys, and together they dumped their bodies into the Thames before making off with the treasure. 6 months later, when the bodies surfaced, suspicion fell on John. Though evidence was thin, he was locked up in the tower. After serving time for lesser crimes, he was released, but fled to Ireland just before new evidence tied him and Alice directly to the murders. Alice hid with the help of a sympathetic guard, John Board, and even began a relationship with him while Wolfe was away. When John returned to London a year later, he was immediately rearrested, and Alice soon joined him in the Cold Harbour Tower. This time, the evidence was enough to find them guilty, and both faced execution. Alice wasn't about to go quietly. Using her charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent, she convinced Board to help her escape, promising a life together and perhaps access to the stolen fortune. On the night of March 23rd, 1534, Board smuggled her a rope, cape, and a replica key. She slipped her chains, crept across the tower grounds, and met him on the top of St. Thomas's Tower. How romantic! Together, they abseiled into a waiting boat and rowed off into the night and were wild and free. For 1 hour. Alice, for an hour, became the first and only woman to escape the Tower of London. But their freedom was short-lived. When they were spotted by night watchmen, Alice and Board were dragged back to the tower. Alice was sentenced to death by drowning, which was the punishment given for piracy. On execution day, she and Wolfe were chained to the wall outside the Tower of London, tantalizingly close to the edge of the River Thames. As the tide rose, they slowly became engulfed by the river, and soon their bodies were completely covered. Their bodies were left there until 3 tides had passed, a grim warning to anyone thinking of crossing the King, and people flocked to see their bodies as they were pecked by crows. John Board's fate was even worse. As he betrayed the crown and his fellow guards, this earned him a place in the torture cell of Little Ease, where no man could stand, sit, or lie comfortably. After days in darkness, he was stretched on a rack and finally left to die, suspended in chains, exposed to the elements. He was also feasted upon by crows, a stark reminder to anyone passing that Henry VIII was no one to cross. And that was the tale of Henry VIII, his 6 wives, and the first and only woman to escape the Tower of London. Now, how was that for a history lesson, Nikki Drews?
Do you know what? I think that might be my favourite episode we've done.
Ever?
Ever. I had such a good time. I really enjoyed that. That was totally up my alley. You know that I love history. I know you love history too. I really enjoyed it. I think the stories from that era are just so fantastical, aren't they? And I think they've become quite a part of our folklore as a country. And I don't know whether they're entirely true and whether some of them have been exaggerated for storytelling.
Fabricated.
Yeah, for storytelling purposes. But what fabulous stories. Just a testament to what happened before there was TV.
Truly, and quite frankly, it's nice to hear stories of things beyond just Henry VIII. A new story of that era that people may not know, because it's not often you hear about the one and only woman to escape the Tower of London, is it?
And how bold she must have been as well to go along with all of that, and to also be a criminal that is pulling off a heist that is worth over £1 million back in the day. How ballsy is that? I know it's not the right thing to do, but in a day and age when you were suppressed and Henry didn't like poor people, we know that, and thought that they should be tortured, it's actually pretty ballsy of somebody to step up and think, actually, I'm going to take the power back and I'm going to steal that money of Henry's. It's going to be mine.
Do we do a bank heist?
I reckon we might not be that great at being bank heist people. Robbers, that's what they're called. Yeah, it's tempting, but we're both too truthful. I feel like the guilt would get to us.
Maybe next time.
Maybe next time. in another life.
Coming up next time on Killers, Cults and Queens.
It's the one you asked for, and we're delivering. It's the creepy case of the Enfield haunting, so you better come prepared with your holy water, because this one is terrifying.
If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. That's all for this episode, and we'll be back next Monday with a brand new case.
And we want to hear from you. We'll be discussing your thoughts and theories this Friday on the Spooky Sleepover bonus show. So pop us an email at killerscultsqueens@gmail.com. We'd love to know which queen you'd be.
Or just DM us on Instagram at Killers, Cults and Queens. Leave a comment on our Spotify or YouTube, or send us a message on Patreon, because we want to know.
If you've been affected by any of the themes in this episode, please have a look at the description for lots of helpful resources.
Remember, you can watch our full-length videos on YouTube, and please do, because I'm turning looks this week, or join our exclusive community over on Patreon at patreon.com/Killers, Cults, Queens.
See you next time, and don't be a killer or join a cult.
Just survive. Goodbye.
Goodbye.